Okay, so next I'd like to speak about um, something that actually isn't here any longer, and it's quite interesting. So we're a little further south on the South Mall. There's the main building and the tower, and if you look in the distance facing south, you have the Capitol of Texas building. And what's not here are 6 statues. So if you look closely, you'll see some of these statuary blocks here that are just missing their statues. There's 2 on this side, 2 on this side, and there was one here and one there flanking the entrance to the main building. And what this was is the poise and influence of none other than Mr. George Washington Littlefield. So he hired a Italian sculptor to sculpt a bunch of statues of Robert E. Lee and Sidney Johnson and the president of the Confederacy. Can't even remember his name. To hell with him. Jefferson Davis, that was his name. But yeah, he had these statues erected, and they've since been torn down, thankfully. And he also paid for the Littlefield Fountain here, which originally he wanted to design this large bronze arch with more Confederate memorials, and it'd just be this big Confederacy memorial. And thank God that didn't happen. The funding wasn't there. I believe even the Italian architect knew how divisive it was, and Littlefield was talked out of it. And so now they have this World War I monument with, I don't know, Columbia facing south towards the Capitol, and these kind of mermaid horses and men, and all this symbolism, and the eagle, and you have to wonder what Littlefield really thought of this memorial. He died in 1920, right after this, the First World War. I mean, it's supposed to be a World War I monument, but I think still, he had this idea of a new Confederacy, a new South, this university being a neo-Confederate university. That's what he wanted. That was his vision. And that was the vision accepted by many others, not just him. And luckily, that has been pushed back there. I mean, even, at the time of the Civil War, there was many Texans, and like Sam Houston, for example, that was against joining the Confederacy. And there was like George Washington Brackenridge, who was also a big part of the university. He was against the Confederacy. He was pro-Union, and him and Littlefield, at that early time of the university, really were at odds with each other. And it looked like Littlefield won most of the battles, but if you step back and look at the bigger picture, I think Brackenridge won the war. Nowadays, you have statues of Cesar Chavez, of Barbara Jordan, of Martin Luther King here on campus, but these awful Confederate statues have been torn down, and I never actually saw them here. What I've been told, though, they were defaced constantly, and people were very angry about them, and it was a hated thing here on campus. Now, you still have the statue of George Washington. This statue was put up in the 1950s. This was after the Confederacy statues, but that was also a time of the Civil Rights Movement. And unfortunately, George Washington was a slave owner, and owned slaves, never freed them. Even after his death, he gave them to his wife. She freed them. And unfortunately as well, George Washington was on the seal of the Confederacy. So the Confederacy and neo-Confederates to this day have held up George Washington as a symbol of the righteousness of the Confederacy and slavery and so on. But I like to hope that we can, look at this statue of George Washington and remember how not to be, as a symbol of don't be like the Confederacy. That's what I see when I see it. And it's just another big part of the history of the campus, and part of the bad history of the campus that has to be faced and not forgotten and remembered. And spoken about, and that there's a lot of racial overtones, especially at this time when a lot of these buildings were built. I mean, think about 1930s, you know, Texas again. It was a very segregated place. And you know, remember George Washington Littlefield, he wanted this library of Southern history that would you know, be this kind of apologetics of the slavery in the South and the Confederacy and so on. And luckily, some very brilliant librarians turned that around and used that money, which is still in effect to this day, still going to this day, present day, for documenting slavery and documenting all the anti-slavery tracts and literature of the time. And it's good to know that that's what happened with that library, and it's good to know, it's good to see these statues torn down, and there's still much to be done. You know, it's this ongoing struggle here, and you know, remembering the past and not repeating it, and being honest about it, and not denying it, not suppressing it, not trying to revision it as something that was okay and acceptable, because it wasn't. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure.